Hello everyone. On behalf of India Business and Trade, I welcome you to this exclusive interaction with Professor Jagdish Sheth. He's the Charles H. Kellstadt Professor of Business in the Goizueta Business School at Emory University. Professor Sheth is globally known for his scholarly contributions in consumer behavior, relationship marketing, comparative strategy, and geopolitical analysis. Today, we will be talking to him on the potential of contract farming, which is a hot topic in India today. And as envisaged in the farm bills introduced by the government, it is slated to be a major game changer in agriculture. So, good morning, sir. Pleasure talking to you, and thank you for giving us your time today.
Good morning.
Morning. And sir, to start with, we would first like to understand what has been the historical context of contract farming in the US? How has it worked for farmers and industry?
Contract farming became very popular after President Abraham Lincoln abolished the slavery. And that's the time industrialization also took place. Country went from a farming economy to an industrial economy. Lots of factories were built, quite a lot in food processing industry. And therefore, large-scale manufacturers needed the raw materials, agricultural raw materials, including, of course, animal raw materials. And they began to, therefore, encourage contract farming by giving orders to the farmers. One of the biggest contract farming, would be any of the food processing companies like Coca-Cola for sugar cane, for example. Del Monte would be for pineapple, for example. It depended on the crop. It even also went into normal crops like soybean, wheat, for example, and of course, corn. Corn has been heavily processed food, as you know. Soybean is processed. And there were companies who were in the business of food processing, and they needed a steady supply of raw material rather than be at the vagary of, in fact, the mandis, as we call it in India, or trading markets, because they're all speculative. So they primarily contract manufacturing grew enormously in the process. Contract manufacturing also grew in America by cooperatives. Many of the agricultural farmers decided that they would rather have their own vertical integration. So they created their own retail brand name, whether you make cranberries, for example, and they have a world-class brand name called Ocean Spray. Most of the Florida orange growers created their own cooperative, and they branded not a brand name, but the product itself, why one should drink more orange juice, one should consume more orange, what are the benefits. California did the same thing about raisins, as we call it, So there are many, many crops where cooperatives became a very key factor, especially if you were a smaller farmer and you couldn't supply to the large food processors. The second best thing was to create a cooperative where you own the cooperative. Cooperatives are equally popular in India. We don't think about that one, but Amul Dairy is basically a cooperative of farmers. It's a processing and a marketing arm primarily. And the Amul valuation is fantastic, which is all owned by the farmers. So that's the second major model that has emerged. Cooperatives is a very key form of contract farming, where you guarantee your supply to the distributor or food processor or a marketer, whoever they are. The third category is very different. In many cases, especially in Central America, Caribbean islands, as large food manufacturers or food processors in America needed more access to raw materials like coffee, for example, or sugar cane, for example. Cotton was very popular at one time, the same reason. So they went to those countries where the land is owned by the government. So now slightly the ownership stays with the government, who can provide large tracts of land, and you either invite a farmer to farm for you or you farm yourself. So in the island of Hawaii, you never own the land. Government always owns the land. They give you a long-term lease. So you now put your own pineapple plantations, for example, very large tracts of land. So that has been one major category, especially because US is so blessed with large land mass. It's a very large continent, northern continent.
Right.
So true in Canada, by the way. Canada was even more innovative because they had the land in the central Canada, prairies, they call it, but what they did not have were the people. So they invited actually people from India, mostly from the Punjab and the Sikh community, and they would give them the land for $1 kind of a notion. Land can be owned by you even. So land comes free to you so long as you have the capability, the interest, etc., to farm. And that is how the farming grew in Canada. And of course, the same Sikh community eventually moved from the West Coast, coming down to the central California, which is a major farming agricultural economy. And it is all done based on the same thing. There is one more thing in America which is somewhat unique. Before the slavery, most of the land was owned by white settlers. They owned large tracts of land. They already had the labor, but after slavery, the labor was free to do what they want to do, which led to another system called sharecropping, where the landlord owns the land, but he needs the labor, so he invites the same African Americans who are now free to come and do the farming for them and then share the crop. They don't pay wages. Remember, in the slavery days or bonded labor, you were given room and board, but there was no savings. Savings was given at the end in bonded labor, like in South Africa, for example, under the Dutch rule, or it has been very true in the Caribbean islands where Indians and the Chinese came as bonded labor. It's very fascinating history. So that is, sharecropping is another major activity in the US, somewhat unique to unique history. But contract farming is very common.
Okay. Okay. And what do you think about how it has really impacted the farmers? Has it been all positive, and or is it that there are ways in which it can harm farmer interests? And if so, what do you think can be done to prevent that?
The advantage of contract farming is you have having a steady buyer. And the buyer is a long-term buyer. Same food processor buys from you from year to year. I'll give you some uncommon examples, but they are in, say, McDonald's is one of those food processors or
Right.
a retail chain. They buy so many potatoes to make French fries.
Right.
So the whole state of Idaho depends on McDonald's account in that fashion, because Idaho is famous for growing the potatoes.
Right.
So you get the guarantee as a contract manufacturer or contract farmer, very much a steady supply, demand, and also you get a pricing right properly, as
Right.
opposed to at the mercy of the mandi essentially, or what we call the farmers markets essentially by and large, where it can go up and down because of the commodity speculations, etc. So that's clearly one key advantage.
Right.
Second major advantage in contract manufacturing is that the buyer, in this case a food processor, has very strong interest in making sure you grow the right species. They give you the sample of the genetics of that species. So they get all the species, people who grow hybrid seeds, for example, provide all that knowledge to you. Sometimes they even provide the knowledge of how to farm, much more modern way, so you get more yield per acre, because it is in their self-interest for the food processor if the farmer does a more efficient job, for example. So those are the advantages in many ways. And the main advantage is that you are not at the mercy of mandi in India, which is usually a local mandi. Here you have a national or a global contract for that matter for
Right.
bigger farmers. Now, here are the disadvantages, especially for smaller farmers. The first major disadvantage is that you may get into debt because you have to buy raw materials on your own. You have to hire labor outside of the family on your own in a small farm. You might need a cattle, or you might need a horse, how you farm it in the traditional way, or you have a tractor and mechanics. So you get into debt, which is a key problem for small farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the debt lender, the person who gives you the money, that may be much more of a problem, because you have to supply, you have signed a contract, so you are under the gun to supply at the same time, and at the same time you have to borrow money to provide the value add that you create on the land, right? Second major problem, of course, is Mother Nature.
Mm.
In other words, If the weather goes bad, you already promised so much quantity at a given price in a contract pricing, contract farming, you may get into trouble. You are taking the risk.
Right.
So for this, in the US, in order to encourage modern farming, government came out with two separate schemes. They created a land banks, which are banks designed specifically to support the farming community from a financing viewpoint. Like we finance the automobiles now, for example. This will talk about the tractors and the combines and all those kinds of equipments that you need. So that's clearly one. They also came out, in fact, at the same time to create storage devices. They're called basically farm elevators, where your commodity, if it's excess you produced because Mother Nature was nice, you had more capacity than contract manufacturer or food processor can buy from you. So you begin to store that extra capacity. They put all that in place. They even provided insurance sometimes against hardship, etc. So insurance, banking became very key pillars about infrastructure support to make farming much more modern, much more competitive in many ways worldwide. So that's clearly the key thing. The third major disadvantage is that you are locked into one particular food processor you supply, and therefore the pricing mechanism is not market mechanism, which is very good in terms of reducing the risk, but at the same time, the upside of access to open market is not there pretty much. So those are the key risk elements more than anything else. The last risk sometimes I found is that the lender, whoever gives the money for operating expenses or sometimes the equipment, often makes land as a collateral, like we do with the home mortgages. The mortgage, the home is a collateral now.
Right.
And therefore, they can become very aggressive and take the possession of your land pretty much because you are unable to make the payments. But other than that, contract manufacturing has been good, especially for smaller farmers. There are very specific reasons why they can survive in contract manufacturing.
Right. One of the provisions of the Farm Bill is that in India is that the farmer's land will not be taken away. So I think that's a positive to secure that. So coming to India, actually, seeing the similarities and differences with the US, how do you see the benefits of contract farming for India, considering that there are so many smaller land holdings in the market, and also the other unique aspects of the Indian agricultural landscape? How do you see it benefiting India?
I think we'll get a clearer division between large farmers and small farmers, both coexisting and segmenting the market in many ways. The small farmers would be better off if they go for more with what we call a high valued crops, where the per acre, whatever you grow, the rupee price per acre of the yield is much greater than rupee price for some other commodity. So for example, in the US, rather than growing the corn and the soybeans, which are commodities, or the wheat, for example, subject to world prices and world hedging and world speculation, you begin to grow grapes, which makes wine. Wine is a more high valued product than what you can make from corn, for example.
Right.
You grow primarily orchard of almonds. You plant almonds as we do mangoes in India, and the almond is a high valued crop essentially. If you are blessed with Mother Nature, you may have a certain type of coffee that you make, and the coffee aroma and the taste and all the stuff is very important to the buyer, like a Starbucks as a retailer will buy, one of the largest coffee buyers, for example, in the world. And they like in the blend they create. So wine can be blended accordingly. And because of your unique nature of what you produce on the soil, you have an advantage. You command higher prices for the same amount of labor that you put in because the land is blessing. It's like a basmati rice in India, which is a unique type of rice, requires a certain way of growing, has a certain species, So I think there are many things. Afghanistan has specialized, for example, in poppy seeds, and therefore in saffron. Saffron is a very high value commodity, for example.
Right.
Worldwide, you can see all the examples where the nature gives you an advantage in growing something in a limited capacity. It cannot be grown out of that one. And if you own that little land, you can live pretty nicely off that land.
Okay, great. And finally, sir, given that we are looking to boost our food processing industry and we see a lot of untapped potential there, what role do you think can a contract farming play for India's food processing industry, considering our huge raw material base and, of course, low levels of processing at present, which we ultimately also want to boost our exports in this category?
Yeah. India is absolutely very uniquely positioned to become one of the major food suppliers of the world. This is where China has already decided they cannot be self-sufficient, they have to import.
Right.
What they've done is very smart strategy for Chinese long-term plan is to buy out large tracts of land or do contract farming in Africa, for example, like in Sudan, Ethiopia to some extent. They've done all over the world. They mapped out themselves. I remember at one time about a decade ago, they were looking at India as a market food basket for them in this bilateral Chindia rising kind of stuff that was taking place. So in many ways, India is very blessed. It's a land of honey and milk, for example, right? I mean, we are the largest producer of milk and the largest consumer, and
Right.
therefore we should be global in our mindset. How can we take our milk products, you make cheese out of the milk products, you make so many things out that can be exported. Made in India, exported all over the world, kind of a thing. So I think we haven't thought about the global mindset and the global market opportunity in processed foods. Wheat can be very large processed foods, for example, for pickles. In fact, there are companies in India which package pickles for private labels in America. The second largest pickle packing company is in India, surprisingly worldwide. They basically take the gore, which is we make, which is like a dill pickle, and apparently the Western world loves it. So these people basically pack it for you, ship it out. A huge market potential. Just one example. So one does not need to ship commodities as we do. One needs to do extra value add. And in India is better off in value add because it has a technical capability. We know how to do it surprisingly well. We are very good in chemistry. We are very good in food processing by and large. One can train those in that matter by sending them to universities which train for scientists who are food processing people. It's very possible in my view. So I think India has a huge, huge opportunity, either as a niche in certain market segments, certain types of foods. Papad, pickle, many things are becoming very mainstream in the Western world as India becomes more and more, and Indian cuisine becomes more popular through our celebrity chefs. So, just India being in the center of attention now, for example. And this is fascinating. I find that in the United Kingdom, among the non-Indian population, the most common food, convenient food, would be fish and chips. It is now totally replaced by Indian curry.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So now the whole the phenomenon, chicken tikka masala seems to be most popular among the Brits, for example.
That's right.
Just tip of the iceberg. So I think India has a huge opportunity, but the main opportunity in India is domestic market. Today, for example, no middle class family or a lower middle class family wants to buy unbranded products. India is a consumer of unbranded products so far. 60% of all the products we daily consume in India are unbranded. They all want branded now. Branded rice, branded wheat, branded atta, branded lentils, whatever it is, for which therefore you need the processing to be done. So you can package it, etc. You can remove the stones and whatever impurities are there. You put quality standards so people begin to believe that that brand name of atta would be really, will be good quality kind of an assurance. To me, that is also a processing. But when we think about farming, we should include milk as a very key component of farming in India. which we don't think generally.
Right, right, right. And with this paradigm of contract farming, how do you see that possibly accelerating? And what would you suggest? How do we utilize it to make that happen?
It's so obvious, but we don't think about it. The largest landowner in any country is the government.
Hmm. Right,
As you've seen, the Indian government, both at the federal level and the state level, has given land for SEC zones, special economic zones. In
right.
those zones, you have the IT industry coming. In those zones, you have, I think we need to set aside government land for farming.
Right.
And that can be done on a contract farming basis where the ownership still may remain with the government, but you invite somebody to do the farming. I mean, today orange grove and orange juice is becoming more common, not just the fresh oranges. Brazil is one of the largest producers of frozen orange juice in the world. 50% of the American orange juice processors, there are several brand names like Minute Maid, which is in India, Coca-Cola brand, Pepsi has its own brand, for example. They all buy from Brazil. India can be a good alternative to Brazil, I can mark my words. Because we do produce good oranges. Our species are very good. Then we make certain unique agricultural fruits that nobody else can make as we do. It's a question of just thinking through and saying, how can I do more value add, both for domestic market and for export market?
Right, right. Yes. So I think to sum up, it's like we need to specifically identify our strengths, look to scale them up, and see what kind of global opportunities we can explore, and think big. Probably as you said, taking a leaf out of China's playbook in this regard. Right, sir. I think that is all for us today. Thank
So
you so much for your time, and
one of
we
the
look.
one of the key issue in India, which I summarize, is that we have the size but not the scale. We are so fragmented.
Right, right.
Once
I
you have
agree.
the scale, you can do modern farming.
Right,
Modern farming will yield a lot more per acre, therefore the value of the land goes up by definition.
right, right,
That's a key advantage to the farmer who has to have the value of his land go up, not by not doing farming, such as giving it for commercial purposes, or
right.
educational institutions or that kind. But as a farmer, they can become more wealthy by increasing the value of the land by modernizing farming, which can happen through contract farming.
It can happen through contract farming. I totally agree, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your time once again, and look forward to interacting with you again. Thank you.